Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Was smoking gun against Todd and Julie Chrisley illegally obtained? Breaking silence via her father Todd Chrisley's Instagram. Savannah shared a website titled Chrisley's Defense. The website included all of the court documents for fans to dig into the case on their own time and come to their own conclusions. As fans dig into these court documents, Todd and Julie Chrisley's infamous warehouse has come up as a topic of conversation again. For those who have followed this story from the beginning, Todd and Julie Chrisley's infamous warehouse is what most agree was the final nail in their coffin. The smoking gun for the case against them. The real question everyone is asking is simple. Did the government obtain the documents inside the infamous warehouse legally or illegally? Todd Chrisley, his wife Julie, and the entire family insists there was never a search warrant, and the evidence was obtained illegally. What do the court documents say, and what are fans saying about it? Keep reading for the details. Was smoking gun against Todd and Julie Chrisley illegally obtained? Looking at the court documents recently shared on Reddit, revenue employees and the sheriffs of the state had permission to get into the warehouse. The goal was to seize items of value, items the government could sell to pay off the $424,000 tax debt. The tax debt the couple owed. During this seizure, documents were found the government later used as proof of the Chrisley's crimes. Proof of tax evasion and fraud. The argument being made is that these documents were obtained illegally. Voicing their opinions in a Reddit thread, fans of the Chrisley family have mixed feelings about it. Some fans note the document allowed the search and seizure of items to be sold to repay the tax debt. The document, however, was not a search warrant, and it did not grant permission to seize items, such as the documents, for other reasons. Some fans, and the family, argue the evidence should not be admissible in order because there was never a search warrant. On the side of justice, the individual who started the thread notes that the discovery is no different than if they have found drugs or a dead body in the warehouse. Additionally, the OP mentions that revenue employees and sheriffs would have called proper authorities upon such a discovery. On the side of the Chrisley family, some fans are arguing the right to seize items to sell never gave anyone permission to shift through and read documents. Check out the Reddit thread below to see the document and discussion. Is the family to blame? Some fans believe Todd and Julie Chrisley should blame themselves. They kept documents allegedly confirming tax evasion and bank fraud. Fans argue that if they had thrown away the documents, they wouldn't be in this mess. Many believe that the couple's arrogance is the reason they received such a lengthy prison sentence. Furthermore, they refused to admit guilt and show remorse. So the judge threw the book at them. The Chrisley saga has never lacked drama. From lavish lifestyles showcased on reality TV to the stunning downfall that landed Todd and Julie Chrisley behind bars, the story has played out like a Southern Gothic fable where faith, fame, and fortune collide. But in the shadows of that tale lingers an unsettling question that refuses to fade. Was the so-called smoking gun of evidence against Todd and Julie Chrisley even obtained legally? For years, their reality show Chrisley Knows Best painted a picture of a family thriving in wealth, wit, and carefully curated chaos. But behind the glossy veneer, prosecutors alleged a sprawling fraud operation. Millions in falsified bank statements, exaggerated assets, and tax evasion. It wasn't simply about paperwork, it was about intent. And the government insisted it had the receipts, literal ones, to prove that the Chrisleys were not just flamboyant personalities, but calculated criminals. Yet, among loyal fans and sharp-eyed legal observers, suspicion swirled. The question wasn't just whether the Chrisleys had made mistakes, but whether the government itself had crossed ethical and constitutional lines in acquiring the very documents that sank them. The paper trail that sparked controversy. Central to the case was a cluster of emails, financial statements, and insider testimonies that prosecutors paraded as irrefutable proof. But whispers soon followed. How exactly did federal investigators come into possession of those internal communications some of which were
Rumors
never
swirled
meant
about
about a
public
disgruntled former employee, one who had been at odds with Todd long before the indictment. Was this insider a whistleblower acting in good faith, or a scorned associate who skirted privacy laws to hand over confidential records? If the latter were true, could the government legally use those materials in its case, or had it effectively built its house on sand? Legal analysts know the stakes. In American courts, evidence obtained improperly through unlawful searches, privacy violations, or breaches of attorney-client privilege can be deemed inadmissible. Entire cases have collapsed because of one misstep in handling sensitive records. And so the speculation grew. Was the Chrisleys' smoking gun tainted from the start? A family that believes they were targeted. Todd Chrisley, never one to shy away from a fight, has long maintained that his family was targeted rather than prosecuted fairly. In podcast appearances before entering prison, he spoke openly about inconsistencies in how evidence was gathered. His claims hinted at selective leaks, manipulated documents, and investigators who may have been too eager to nail the flashy TV family to the wall. Julie, typically the quieter of the two, echoed those sentiments in her own way. She often framed it as a battle not just against allegations, but against a system willing to bend rules when convenient. To her, the entire ordeal wasn't simply about numbers in a ledger. It was about dignity stripped away because powerful people wanted to make an example out of the Chrisleys. Whether these were the words of innocent people fighting injustice or guilty parties clinging to a narrative remains hotly debated. Still, one fact remains. Both Todd and Julie insist that the so-called clinching evidence never should have seen the light of day. The role of the FBI and the gray zone of digital evidence. The digital age complicates everything. In the past, investigators had to seize physical documents with search warrants signed by judges. Now, emails, cloud storage, and encrypted communications blur the lines. If a former associate provided login credentials without consent, did investigators knowingly benefit from an unlawful act? Did they cross into a gray zone of digital trespass? Some insiders claim that the Chrisleys' financial data was accessed in ways that remain questionable. Others argue that prosecutors acted entirely within the law, relying on testimony and voluntary cooperation from former employees. The problem is that transparency around these issues has been murky at best. Fans have seized on that ambiguity. To them, it feels as though the Chrisleys were not simply investigated but hunted, their private world dismantled with methods that may not hold up under closer scrutiny. The appeal and the search for justice. Right now, appeals wind their way through the courts. The Chrisleys' legal team has argued vigorously that prosecutorial misconduct tainted the process. If any piece of evidence was obtained illegally, or if investigators encouraged unlawful access to private records, it could unravel the case. Appeals are long, grinding battles, often hinging on nuances that never made the headlines during the initial trial. Supporters cling to the hope that a judge might see things differently, that perhaps the Chrisleys were convicted not just of alleged crimes, but of being too loud, too visible, too wealthy in an era that resents the rich. If the supposed smoking gun turns out to have been poisoned fruit, the narrative could shift dramatically. Imagine the reversal. Headlines no longer about fraud, but about overreach, misconduct, and wrongful convictions. Todd and Julie would go from cautionary tale to sympathetic figures, martyrs of a flawed justice system. The emotional cost of uncertainty.